Fellow dogs act suspiciously a month after losing their sibling dog, leading their owner to an abandoned field.
But before we start, please take a moment to give this video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll never miss these great stories.
If you own a pet, you know what it's like to have one. We care for him like our own kid. The doggo or the kitty make our world bloom with happiness. Their wagging tail, little paws, and soft fur are worth dying for. And not to forget, they are the best cuddle partners. We love them so much that imagining our lives without them is the toughest of all. Unfortunately, a family loses their dog. The doggo goes missing and the family is stressed. For nearly a month, they try to find him but couldn't. All they hoped was for the pooch's safety and well-being. When all the worst thoughts came to them, they have a new problem, which was furthermore distressing. The family was in a state of panic. Bruno, their beloved Labrador Retriever mix, was now missing for over a month. They had been trying their best to find their pooch, but as days passed, their hopes turned into despair. Though they didn't wish to agree that they had lost him forever, they had no other options either. The family, for the most obvious reasons, was in pain. Everything at their home would remind them of their dog. His barks, his tail, that he would wag the moment he would see them, how he would come running to greet his dad at the door every evening. At this phase in life, only a reunion with their Bruno could help them out, but this didn't seem to happen. John and Cindy Billisberger, a couple from Estevan in Saskatchewan, Canada, owned a Labrador Retriever, who they named Bruno. They brought him home when he was a few months old. The couple was fond of dogs and owned 3 other pooches. When Bruno came to them, they felt as if the family was now complete. Bruno, with his 3 elder siblings, were happy together. They would play with each other, run from one corner of the lawn to the other. The 3 elder brothers have nurtured and loved him like their young baby, and when he went missing, these 3 were deeply disheartened and saddened, as if they had lost all the vitality from their life. The 4 dogs had this routine of going to the nearby park and playing there. They then would return home for the supper, but one day in the month of September 2016, 4 dogs went for their usual walk, but only 3 returned home. Bruno went missing and none knew where he was. Even the 3 other dogs had no clue where the younger one was. They barked and roamed around but couldn't find Bruno. When John and Cindy realized this, their hearts skipped a beat. John and Cindy went into the woods where the dogs often go. They were calling out his name loud, but unfortunately got no reply from the opposite side. John went to one side of the woods while Cindy started looking for Bruno on the usual spots where he would often be seen, but there were no signs of him. When they couldn't locate the dog in the woods, they thought that maybe he would have returned home while they were busy searching for him there. Keeping their hopes high, they went home to find Bruno there, but their hopes shattered as the pooch wasn't there either. Where was he? The couple was worried. The entire day had passed and the night was about to close in. There were no traces of Bruno anywhere around. Not only John and Cindy were tense, but the 3 other dogs were too. They were not eating anything and were just constantly gazing at the door, hoping for Bruno to arrive at the doorsteps. September went by and October had set in, but Bruno was nowhere to be found. Each day was getting tough, and the family's hope of reuniting with their beloved pooch grew thin. All they prayed was for his well-being. Little did they know what a mess the doggo had landed in. John started to have weird thoughts. All he thought was if Bruno was even alive. Was he struggling to live without food and water? On cold nights, did he get any warmth? The concerned father did not know what to do and assumed that some other family might have adopted him. Until one fine day, something weird happened. John was sitting in his front lawn when the 3 other dogs started to bark out loud. Initially, John could not understand why they were barking like that, and then one of the dogs held him from his trousers and took him to a spot. The spot John knew, but not like the one he did that day. The dogs took him to the place which would be about half a mile away from his place. This was one of the neighbors' properties where John had been around many times, but the dogs showed a particular interest at one of the particular spots there. Initially, John ignored, but what the dogs did next made him act up immediately. John did not appreciate standing near his neighbor's property for an unknown reason. He felt awkward. He tried to move his pooch using the leash, but the dogs were too stubborn to move. John left them and started to move, and the very moment the three of them started to bark, John knew he had to investigate. When John finally saw what exactly the dogs were trying to grab his attention towards, John was shocked. He stood there stunned. All he could say was, "This is dangerous." There was a big hole in the ground, John recalls. It must be a 4-foot wide and nearly 10 feet deep hole. It looked like an old well which was once dug but later completely forgotten about. It was covered with grass now, but still the possibility of an accident occurring there was really high. But this wasn't why the dogs were barking. While discovering a well this old was an interesting thing in itself, there was more to it. The dogs were barking for a reason other than this, and this reason was what turned the Bilderbergers' lives upside down. The dogs were trying to get John's attention to what was inside the well, and when John looked into the well, it was all dark and he could barely see anything. But when he gave it a closer look with all his attention, he couldn't believe what he saw at the very bottom. Tears rolled down from his eyes. At the bottom of the well was Bruno. The dog, which was missing for over 28 days now, had ended up in this well. John's heart sank to find him there. The dog luckily managed to survive all the odds. John was trembling to even look at Bruno in that condition. Bruno was in poor condition, almost on the verge of death. He was extremely weak and could barely bark. His eyes were half closed. The poor pooch was just breathing somehow. Bruno was badly infected. He had cuts and sores all over his body. The dog was stinking and his wounds were bleeding. He probably had hurt himself in attempts to climb up the well and rescue himself. John knew he had to get his beloved dog out at that moment. John immediately dialed his son's number and called him for help. The little boy in an instant tied a rope around his waist and jumped inside the well. He was ready to risk his life and save the dog. However, Bruno seemed frightened. Bruno was so weak and feeling ill that he couldn't even recognize his owner. John's son carefully picked up Bruno in his arms and slowly climbed out of the well. He kept on caressing him so that the pooch felt a little better. The other 3 dogs stood there silent, looking at their sibling struggling. John and his son drove to the vet in Estevan as fast as possible. On their way, they constantly prayed that Bruno just manages to breathe until they reach the doctor for help. And when they reached the doctors, they were stunned to see a pooch in this poor condition. The staff at the hospital immediately infused fluids and medicines to the pooch. They started treating his open wounds and did a checkup to ensure all his injuries are properly medicated. Though the dog's chances of survival were very slim, everyone just prayed that he made it. After a thorough examination, Bruno was diagnosed to be poorly malnutritioned, anemic, and even dehydrated. He had lost quite a lot of his body weight and muscle mass. And this wasn't all. Rather, the pooch had injured his paws to the extent that there were hairline fractures. Bruno needed intensive care for 24 hours. His condition was critical, and to ensure that he recovers from it, one has to be around him and provide him all the care and nourishment. With time, Bruno started to heal. He was showing signs of recovery. His open wounds healed and his body weight was reaching close to the expected levels. He now started recognizing John and Cindy once again. He even wagged his tail a little. Bruno was at the veterinary hospital for nearly 22 days, and almost after 2 months of being lost, the dog was finally discharged and was ready to go home. Though he was still weak, nothing else other than home could heal him better now. Bruno still was fighting refeeding syndrome, but at home, he felt a whole lot better. The love and warmth from his siblings and the couple would help him recover even faster. The family was overwhelmed to reunite with their missing pooch. We hope that the dog regains health and starts running around as before.